She never expected to see her first love again. Everything changed. Now he was a mafia boss. The file landed on Nadia's desk at 8:43 in the morning, and the name on the cover page made her forget how to breathe. She had been reaching for her coffee. Her hand stopped mid-air, just froze there, hovering over the mug like her body already knew what her brain was still catching up to. She looked at the name again. Read it twice. A third time. Marcus Vidal Estrada. 4 years. 4 years of mornings where she had trained herself not to think about him. 4 years of small routines built like a wall, brick by brick, day by day, just to keep that particular door closed. And now here he was. Not a ghost. Not a memory she had to chase away before her first cup of coffee. A name on a legal file, sitting on her desk, in her firm, in her life, just like that. She set the file down, picked up her coffee, took a long, slow sip and told herself to get it together. Nadia worked as a paralegal at a mid-sized law firm on the north side of Chicago. She was 23 years old, sharp in the way that people become sharp when life sands them down early, and organized in the way that people become organized when the alternative is chaos they cannot afford. Her apartment was small and clean and hers. Her salary was decent. Her weekends were quiet in a way she had chosen, and was still convincing herself she enjoyed. She had built this life carefully, the same way you build anything after something falls apart. You do not think about what used to stand there. You just keep laying bricks. The file in front of her was for a new deposition. Her supervising partner, a tall, brisk woman named Claire Donovan, had dropped it on her desk without ceremony that morning, with nothing more than, "Prep this for Thursday. Client background is inside." That was it. No warning. No reason for Claire to think a warning was needed. Claire did not know about Marco. Nobody at the firm did. Nadia had kept her two lives very separate, the life she had now and the life she used to have, the south side and the north side, the girl she had been at 19, and the woman she was trying to become. She was good at keeping things separate. She had been practicing for 4 years. She opened the file. Marcus Vidal Estrada, age 24, represented by a senior partner at a firm across the city. The deposition was in connection with a contract dispute that Nadia's firm was handling for a logistics company. On the surface, it looked routine. A business dispute. A name on paper. But Nadia had known Marco since she was 14 years old. She had known him when he was a skinny kid with scuffed shoes and a laugh that could fill a room. She had known him when he was 16 and already had that particular quality some boys have. That gravity, where people just naturally arranged themselves around him. She had known him at 17 when he looked at her in a way that made her feel like the only person standing in a very large, very empty field. And she had known him at 19 when she woke up one morning and he was simply gone. No note, no call, no explanation. She had waited for him in the way that only 19-year-olds wait, which is to say completely and foolishly, and with a specific kind of hope that does not know how to protect itself yet. She had gone to his mother's house every Sunday for 11 months. Mrs. Vidal would open the door with sad eyes and say, "No news, mija," and Nadia would nod and go home and pretend she was fine to everyone who asked. She wore the thin silver bracelet he had given her for her 18th birthday, until the clasp broke on a cold Tuesday morning, while she was walking to the bus stop on Ashland Avenue. It fell and disappeared into a storm drain at her feet. She stood there for a moment, staring at the grate. Then she walked to the bus stop. She did not go back for it. That was the moment she decided, in the quiet way you decide things that you do not say out loud, that some people are better off as memories, that some doors are better kept closed, that she had a whole life ahead of her, and she was not going to spend it on the corner of Ashland Avenue, looking into a storm drain. She had meant it. She still meant it, mostly. She looked at the file again. Thursday was 3 days away. She thought about going to Claire and asking to be moved off the assignment. She could think of a reason. She was good at thinking of reasons. But as she sat there with the file open in front of her, and the name staring back at her, she realized that she was not actually going to do that. She did not fully understand why. She told herself it was professional. She told herself she was an adult and this was a job, and 4 years was a long time, and she was absolutely fine. She closed the file, finished her coffee, opened her laptop and started pulling background research. She worked for the rest of the morning without stopping. She pulled records, cross-referenced documents, prepared her question structure. She was precise and methodical and very good at her job, and she did not let herself think about the boy with the scuffed shoes more than 4 or 5 times. At lunch, she called her best friend Carmen. Carmen Diaz had been her best friend since the 7th grade, which meant she knew everything, including things Nadia had never said out loud, because Carmen had the particular gift of knowing things without being told. She picked up on the second ring. "Something happened," Carmen said immediately. It was not a question. "A deposition came in," Nadia said. There was a short pause. "How short?" "What?" "The pause you're doing before you tell me the thing. How short is this going to be before you get to the actual thing?" Nadia stared out the window of the empty conference room she had ducked into to make the call. Outside, Chicago was doing what Chicago does in early October, which is look beautiful from a distance while being extremely cold. "It's Marco," she said. Carmen was quiet for 3 full seconds, which was unusual. Carmen was not a 3-second pause kind of person. Marco, she finally said. "Yes, you're Marco. He was never my Marco." "Nadia." "I know. What does the file say?" "Not much. Business dispute. He's on the other side. I'm prepping the deposition. Can you get off the case?" "Probably. Are you going to?" Nadia did not answer right away. Outside, a gust of wind pushed a handful of leaves across the sidewalk below. "I don't know," she said. Carmen made a sound that was not quite a word but communicated several very clear opinions simultaneously. "I'm fine," Nadia said. "You said that same exact thing for 11 months after he left," Carmen said. "Every single Sunday. I'm fine. I'm completely fine. You were not fine, Nadia. You were 19 and you were heartbroken, and you kept going to his mother's house because you didn't know what else to do." "I know." "So, I know, Carmen." "Okay," Carmen said, and her voice shifted into something softer. "Okay, call me after." "After what?" "After Thursday." Nadia said goodbye and hung up. She sat alone in the conference room for another minute, her phone face down on the table, looking out at the city. Then she stood up, straightened her jacket, and went back to work. The next 3 days moved in their usual way. Morning coffee, commute, long hours at her desk. She prepped the deposition file until she knew it better than she knew her own apartment. She told herself that professional preparation was the best thing she could do, that if she walked into that room knowing every detail of every document, there would be no room for anything else. No room for old feelings to wander in and make themselves comfortable. She believed this right up until Thursday morning, when she walked into the conference room and he was already there. He was sitting at the far end of the table, broader than she remembered, and still, the kind of still that is not relaxed but controlled, the stillness of someone who has learned to keep everything on the inside. He was wearing a suit that said something about the last 4 years without saying it out loud. 2 men stood near the door who were not introduced and did not look like they were there for the deposition. He looked up when she walked in. Their eyes met. For a moment, the whole room contracted to just that. The 2 of them, across a conference table, in the gray October light. Then he said her name. Nadia. She sat down, opened her file. "Mr. Estrada," she said, and her voice was level and clear and gave nothing away, and she was very proud of that, and she held on to it for the next 2 hours, like it was the only solid thing in the room. She did not look at his hands. She did not think about the scar on his left knuckle, or how it got there. She did not think about any of it. She told herself this. She thought about it constantly. When the deposition ended, she gathered her documents without looking up. She kept her movements efficient. She was almost out the door. "You were always the best at that," he said quietly from behind her. She stopped. "At what?" she said. She did not turn around, pretending everything was fine. She walked out. She made it all the way to the elevator, down to the parking structure, and almost to her car, before her hands started shaking. She pressed them flat against the roof of the car and breathed. Once, twice. Looked at the concrete ceiling above her and told herself this was fine. She was fine. She had done her job, And now she was going to get in her car and drive home, and that was the end of it. That was the end of it. Except that when she turned around, he was standing 10 feet away. She had not heard him follow her. That was the first thing she thought, which was a strange first thought, but it landed before anything else. He was big, he was real, he was right there, and she had not heard him at all. "This conversation cannot happen," she said. Her voice was steady. She was genuinely impressed with herself. "We are on opposite sides of a case. You need to leave." "I know," he said. "Then why are you here?" He looked at her for a long moment. That same look he used to have. The one that meant he was choosing his words the way other people chose which road to take. Carefully. Knowing that the wrong one led somewhere he did not want to go. "Because you're going to find things out," he said. "And I'd rather you hear it from me." She should have left. She knew that then, and she knows it now. She should have gotten in her car and driven away, and called Claire in the morning, and asked to be moved off the case, and that would have been the right thing, the professional thing, the smart thing. She crossed her arms and leaned against her car. "You have 5 minutes," she said. He talked for 40. Not everything. She understood later that it was not close to everything, but enough. He told her that leaving had not been a choice the way she had always assumed it was. That at 19 he had been handed something he had not asked for and could not refuse, a debt that belonged to his father and had been transferred to him the night his father did not come home. That the people he became connected to were not the kind of people you explain to someone you love without putting them in danger. That staying would have meant pulling her into something he could not protect her from. She stood in that parking structure in the cold and listened to every word. She did not cry. She had not cried over Marco since she was 20, and had finally understood, lying in her dark apartment one night, that he was not coming back. She had cried then, once, hard, and then she had not done it again. "You should have told me," she said when he finished. "You would have stayed," he said. "Yes. That's why I didn't tell you." She looked at him for a long time. He looked back. Neither of them looked away. "The case," she said finally. "I can't talk to you outside of the deposition. I think you know that." "I know." "Then this is the last time." He nodded. Something moved across his face, quick and quiet, and then it was gone. She got in her car. She drove home. She sat in the parking lot of her apartment building for a long time, engine off, keys in her lap, listening to the silence. Then she went upstairs and called Carmen. "Tell me I'm not an idiot," she said when Carmen picked up. Carmen was quiet for 2 full seconds. "What happened?" Carmen said. Nadia told her. Carmen listened without interrupting, which was not like her, which meant she understood that this was serious. When Nadia finished, there was another pause. "You believed him," Carmen said. It was not an accusation. It was just a fact that Carmen had already arrived at. "I don't know," Nadia said. "Yes, you do." Nadia pressed her back against the couch cushion and stared at the ceiling. Her apartment was quiet and small, and exactly the same as it had been that morning. That felt strange to her, that it could look exactly the same. "I believed him," she admitted. "Okay," Carmen said. Her voice was careful. "Okay. And what are you going to do about the conversation? The one you just had?" Nadia already knew the answer to that. She had been turning it over in her mind on the drive home. There was a protocol. There was a professional obligation. She had had an unscheduled private conversation with the opposing party, and regardless of the personal history behind it, that was something she was required to disclose to her supervising partner. "I'm going to tell Claire in the morning," she said. "Everything?" "Enough." Carmen breathed out slowly. "Good," she said. "That's good, Nadia." They stayed on the phone for another hour, not always talking, just existing in the same audio space the way old friends do when something has happened that is too big to fully process alone. After she hung up, Nadia sat with the quiet for a while longer. She thought about a bracelet at the bottom of a storm drain. She thought about 11 months of Sunday mornings on a porch on the south side. She thought about what it means to bury someone who is still alive somewhere in the world, and what it means when that person resurfaces, not as a ghost, but as a man in a very expensive suit with 2 silent men, man standing by the door, and a story that explained everything and explained nothing at all. She was not okay, but she was functional, and in Nadia's experience, functional was sometimes the best you could do, and it was enough to get you to morning, and morning was when things could be addressed one at a time. She went to bed. She did not sleep well. She had not expected to. She told Claire the next morning. She sat in Claire's office with her hands in her lap and delivered it cleanly. She had a personal history with the opposing party. They had spoken briefly in the parking structure after the deposition. She understood this should have been disclosed immediately, and she was disclosing it now. Claire listened with the expression of someone who is calculating several things simultaneously. Personal history meaning what? Claire said. We grew up in the same neighborhood. We were close when we were younger. I had not seen him in 4 years. I did not know he would be the deponent when you gave me the file. What did you discuss in the parking structure? He wanted to explain his disappearance from my life. I told him the conversation couldn't continue. It lasted a few minutes. This was technically accurate. Nadia had become precise at the border between full disclosure and necessary omission. It was a skill she did not feel particularly good about, but she had it. Claire was quiet for a moment. I'm moving you off the case, she said. Not as a disciplinary measure. As a precaution. You understand. Of course. You handled it correctly by coming to me. Nadia nodded. She kept her face neutral. She went back to her desk. For the next week, she threw herself into other work. She arrived early. She left late. She answered every email. She was the most useful person in the office, and her colleagues noticed, and she accepted their compliments with a small smile and absolutely no explanation. She did not hear from Marco. She did not expect to. She had told him that conversation was the last time, and she had meant it, and she was fairly sure he understood. He was not stupid. He had never been stupid. That had always been part of the problem. Then, 10 days after the deposition, she got a text from a number she did not recognize. It said, I'd like to have dinner. Not as anything connected to the case. You've been moved off. I checked. You can say no. She stared at the phone for a long time. She typed back, How did you get this number? He replied, Your firm's directory. It's public. She set the phone face down on the table, picked it up again, set it down again. Carmen called her 40 minutes later, which meant somehow Carmen already knew, which was one of Carmen's abilities that Nadia had stopped questioning years ago. Don't, Carmen said before Nadia could speak. I haven't decided anything. That's not a no. Carmen. Nadia, he left. He vanished for 4 years. He shows up in a very expensive suit, with an explanation that sounds very reasonable and very well constructed, and now he wants dinner. You think he's lying? I think it doesn't matter if he's lying. I think you are 23 years old and you have a good job and a good life, and you worked very hard to build both of those things. And I don't want to watch you knock them down, because someone who hurt you is very good looking. Nadia was quiet. You already said yes, Carmen said. I said I hadn't decided. Nadia. I said I hadn't decided, Carmen. Carmen made the sound, the one that communicated everything without words. Be careful, Carmen said finally, quietly. Please just be careful. I'm always careful. No, Carmen said. With everything else you are. With him you never were. Nadia thought about that after she hung up. She sat with it honestly, the way she had learned to sit with uncomfortable things, not pushing it away, not convincing herself it wasn't true. Carmen was right. She had never been careful with Marco. Not once. Not ever. Not from the first time he had looked at her, at 14 years old, like she was something worth looking at. She picked up her phone. She typed, 1 dinner, 1 conversation. That's all this is. His reply came in under a minute. Understood. They met on a Friday evening at a quiet restaurant in the West Loop, the kind of place with low lighting and tables set far enough apart that conversations stay private. Nadia arrived 5 minutes early and was already seated when he walked in, because she had decided that she would not be the one waiting this time. That was a small thing, but it felt important. He was wearing a dark jacket and no tie, and she noticed, against her better judgment, that the years had been generous to him in a way that felt deeply unfair given the circumstances. She looked down at the menu when he sat across from her. "You look well," he said. "Don't," she said pleasantly. He almost smiled. "Okay." They ordered. They talked. It was, for the first hour, surprisingly normal, in the cautious, careful way that two people talk when they both know they are circling something large and are not ready to walk toward it directly. He asked about her work. She answered briefly. She asked about his business interests in general terms. He answered carefully. She noticed things she had not noticed in the conference room, because she had been too focused on maintaining her professional composure to observe him closely. He was quieter than she remembered. The laugh was still there, but it arrived less often and more privately, like he had learned to keep it on a shorter leash. His eyes moved across the room occasionally, not nervously, systematically, the way someone scans a space when they have learned to always know where the exits are. She noticed this, and she filed it away. The second hour of the dinner was different. The food came and went, and the conversation went somewhere deeper, not because either of them planned it, but because there is a particular gravity between people who shared something real, and eventually that gravity wins. "Are you happy?" he asked. It was a simple question, and he asked it simply, without performance. She considered lying. She was good at it when she wanted to be. "Most of the time," she said. "I have things I'm proud of. That's different from happy, but it's not nothing." He nodded, like that made sense to him, like he understood the distinction personally. "What about you?" she said, not as a reciprocation of politeness, as a real question. He was quiet for a moment. "I'm working on something," he said. "I can't explain it fully, but I'm trying to get somewhere different than where I am." She looked at him. "That's vague," she said. "Yes. Is it intentionally vague, or do you not know how to explain it?" He held her gaze. "Both," he said. She believed him. She hated, again, that she believed him. There was something in the way he said it, not defensively, not with the particular energy of someone constructing something on the spot. He said it the way people say things they have been living with for a long time and have never found the right words for. She believed him, and she did not know what to do with that. They left the restaurant at 9. He walked her to her car, 3 blocks through the cold. Neither of them rushed. At the car, she turned and looked at him. "Marco," she said. It was the first time she had used his real name, not the formal version from the conference room, since he had appeared back in her life. "Yeah," he said. "Whatever you're working on," she said. "Whatever you're trying to get to, I hope you make it." He looked at her for a long moment. "I'm trying," he said. She drove home. She did not call Carmen that night. She sat with it alone, which felt right. Some things need a little space before they become speakable. She made tea, sat by the window, watched the city outside, the lights and the traffic and the ordinary ongoing motion of everything. She thought, this is not a love story resuming. She was clear on that. She was not 19 anymore, and she was not going to pretend that a dinner and a parking structure conversation undid 4 years of silence. But she also thought, he came back, not as a fantasy, not as a rumor, as a real person, with real weight, and a real explanation, and real damage, and a real thing he was trying to move toward. She did not know what that meant yet. She thought she would find out. Nadia was the kind of person who made decisions slowly and then stayed with them. She was not impulsive. She had worked too hard and come too far to be impulsive. But once she decided something, she decided it fully, and she did not go back. She decided to see Marco again. She knew, going into it, what this was and what it was not. It was not a reunion. It was not forgiveness fully given, because she had not yet decided whether there was something to forgive or simply something to understand. It was not a beginning. It was more like a conversation that had been left open for 4 years, and she was choosing, with her eyes open and her guard exactly where it needed to be, to go back and hear the rest of it. They had dinner 3 more times over the following 2 weeks. Always public places, always evenings, always with that same careful quality to the conversation, like 2 people navigating around something significant without quite touching it directly. She told Carmen after the 3rd dinner, Carmen listened, said nothing for a moment. "How do you feel?" Carmen said. "Complicated," Nadia said. "That's honest, at least." "I know what I'm doing, Carmen. Do you? I'm not falling back into something blindly. I'm paying attention. I'm watching him." "What are you watching for?" Nadia thought about it. "Whether he's the same person," she said, "or whether whatever the last 4 years made him is something I can actually look at clearly." Carmen was quiet for a moment. "And?" "And I don't know yet," Nadia said, "but I think I need to find out." Carmen did not push after that. Carmen knew Nadia well enough to know when pushing would just make the door close faster. What Nadia was watching for, she found in pieces. There were things about Marco that were exactly as she remembered. The particular way he listened, completely, without filling silences before they were ready to be filled. The dry humor that arrived quietly and landed exactly right. The way he spoke about people he cared about. His mother, a younger cousin named Eddie who was still in school on the south side, with a warmth that was private and genuine, and entirely different from the controlled stillness he carried everywhere else. And there were things that were new, things that had not been in him at 19. He moved through the world differently now, not with arrogance, but with a kind of awareness that went beyond ordinary confidence. He always sat with his back to the wall. He knew which direction every entrance was without appearing to look. His phone buzzed frequently, and he stepped away to answer it. Not rudely, but always completely, giving the call his full attention in a way that made it clear the calls were not optional. She noted these things without comment. Then there was the night at the second restaurant, a quieter place on the west side, when a man at the next table said something she did not fully hear. She caught only the end of it, a name, and a tone that was something between familiar and deliberate. Marco's response was nothing visible. No change in expression, no raised voice. He simply went still, and the quality of that stillness was different from his usual stillness, and the air in their immediate vicinity seemed to shift, in a way she could feel, but could not describe. The man looked away first. Marco looked back at her, and continued the conversation they had been having, as if nothing had interrupted it. She did not ask. She filed it away. She understood for the first time, not as a concept, but as something physical in her chest, what the phrase, different world, actually meant. Not different opinions or different habits or different circles of friends, a different set of rules, a different understanding of how things worked and who held what, and what the stakes actually were. She drove home that night and sat with that feeling honestly. She was not naive. She had never been naive. She had grown up on the south side of Chicago where you learned young that the world had layers and that some of those layers operated by systems that the official version of things did not describe. She understood what Marco was connected to. She had understood it since he told her in the parking structure. She was not pretending otherwise. The question she was sitting with was different. It was not, "Do I know what this is?" She knew what it was. The question was, who is the person inside it? And is that person the same one who used to walk her home in the dark so she wouldn't have to walk alone? Who used to bring her mother soup when her mother was sick? Who used to read borrowed library books and argue about them with her until 2 in the morning? She did not have the full answer yet, but she was starting to form one. 2 weeks after that dinner, she was at her kitchen table on a Tuesday night, with a glass of water and a book she was not really reading, when her phone buzzed with a news alert. She looked at the screen. Federal indictment, organized crime connections, Port Authority contracts, several names, a web of connections described in the compressed language of legal reporting. She read it 3 times. Marco's name was not on it. She set the phone down on the table and looked at the wall across from her. She thought about the things he had said, about working toward somewhere different, about trying to get out. She thought about the 2 silent men who had been at the deposition. She thought about the phone calls he stepped away to take. She thought about the man at the restaurant, and the quality of the stillness that had followed. She thought, people do not escape things like that easily, and people do not have their names missing from indictments by accident. She picked up her phone. She did not text Marco. She sat with the news alert, and with her own thoughts, and with the very still, very uncomfortable feeling of understanding something she had not been told. She did not sleep well that night, but in the morning, she got up and went to work. And she was precise and efficient and good at her job, and she held everything else in a separate compartment, the way she had always been able to do, and she waited. She had gotten very good at waiting. She was in the middle of drafting a contract summary on a Thursday afternoon when her phone buzzed with Marco's name on the screen. He had not reached out in 10 days, not since the Tuesday night of the news alert. She was not sure if that was intentional or coincidental. She suspected it was intentional. He was too careful for things to be coincidental. She answered. "I need to tell you something," he said. In person. "Marco, I know what I'm asking. I just need you to know something before you find out from somewhere else." She looked at her screen for a moment. Then she looked back at her computer. Then she said, "Tomorrow evening, same place as the first dinner." "Okay," he said. "Thank you." She hung up and sat for a moment. She texted Carmen. He called. Meeting him tomorrow. Carmen replied in under 30 seconds. "I'm coming to your apartment tonight." Carmen arrived at 7 with food from the place on Division Street that Nadia liked, and they sat at Nadia's small kitchen table and ate, and Carmen did not lecture, which meant she was genuinely worried. Carmen lectured when she thought there was still time to change the outcome. She went quiet when she thought the outcome was already in motion. "Whatever he tells you tomorrow," Carmen said, "you call me after." "I will. Not 2 hours after. Right after." "Okay." Carmen looked at her carefully. "How are you doing?" "Actually." Nadia thought about it. "I feel like I've been standing at the edge of something for weeks," she said. "And tomorrow, I find out what's at the bottom." Carmen reached across the table and squeezed her hand once. That was all. They watched a movie after dinner. Something light. Something that asked nothing of either of them. And at 10 o'clock, Carmen put on her coat and hugged Nadia at the door and said, "Call me," and left. Nadia did not sleep. She lay in the dark and went through everything she knew, everything she had observed, everything she had felt and thought and pushed aside and come back to over the past several weeks. She had always been good at analyzing things clearly, at separating what she knew from what she hoped and what she feared. It was a skill that had cost her some of the softer things in life, the ability to be carelessly hopeful, to let things be uncomplicated, but it had also kept her standing when she needed to be standing. She lay in the dark, and she was clear-eyed, and she was not at all ready for the morning. Morning came anyway. She got up, got dressed, went to work, did her job, did it well, answered every email and completed every task, and did not look at the clock more than was reasonable. She was functional. She was always functional. It was, as Carmen had pointed out more than once, both her greatest strength and a fairly exhausting way to live. At 6 o'clock she walked into the restaurant. He was already there, not because he had arrived early, she realized, because he had never left. The restaurant had not yet opened for the dinner service when she arrived, but Marco was at the corner table with a cup of coffee and the quiet air of someone who had arranged to be there early. He stood when she walked in. She sat down. She looked at him across the table and said, "Tell me." And he did. He did not tell it quickly. He told it the way he had always done things, carefully, beginning at the beginning, making sure the structure was clear before he built on it. He told her that for the past 14 months he had been cooperating quietly with a federal investigation, that the names on the indictment she had seen in the news alert were the men above him in a chain of connections that had started with his father's debt and grown into something much larger, that what he had helped build, he had spent the last year and a half helping to dismantle, at considerable risk to himself that she was only beginning to understand from the way he described it. Not dramatized, just factual, which made it more real than any drama could have. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she sat with it for a moment. "So the 2 men at the deposition," she said. "Protection," he said. "Yes." "And your name not being on the indictment?" "Part of the agreement." "And the phone calls?" "Yes." She looked at him. "For 14 months?" "Yes." "While you were still," she searched for the right word, "present in what you were dismantling?" "It had to look like nothing had changed," he said. "That was the point." She absorbed this. She thought about what that meant. Living inside a world you are working to bring down, moving through it every day, answering those phone calls, maintaining every surface as if nothing has shifted, while underneath it is all shifting constantly. She thought about what that does to a person, what it costs. She looked at his hands on the table. Still, what happens now? She asked. I leave Chicago, he said. Relocation. New documentation. The full arrangement. She was quiet. When? 3 weeks. She looked at the table, at the coffee cup in front of her that she had not touched. You came to tell me because, she said. She was not sure how to finish the sentence. Because you're the only person I owe the real version to, he said, simply, without decoration. She looked at him. She thought about a girl at 19 standing on a porch on the south side for 11 months. She thought about a bracelet in a storm drain. She thought about 4 years of mornings, and a small apartment built carefully, and a life that was genuinely hers now, that she had genuinely made, that she was genuinely proud of. She thought about what it means to love someone young, and what it means when that same person reappears a lifetime later, as someone both recognizable and completely different. She thought about whether the love you feel for the person someone used to be is the same thing as loving who they have become, and whether those two things can ever fully meet. She was not going to ask him to stay. She knew that before she walked in. This was not that conversation. The world he had been inside for the last 4 years was not something she could stand beside, and the person he would become in whatever came next was not a person she had met yet. You cannot love a future version of someone. You can only love the one in the room. She looked at the man in the room. I'm glad you're safe, she said. Her voice was steady. She meant every word. I'm glad you're okay. And I mean that. Not as a closing line. I genuinely mean it. He looked at her for a long moment. I know, he said quietly. I hope you get where you're trying to go. She stood up. She picked up her coat. She held it for a moment. You were the best part of who I used to be, she said. I think you should know that. She saw something move across his face, quiet and genuine, and not hidden fast enough. She turned and walked to the door. Outside, the Chicago wind hit her immediately, cold and direct and very real. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, buttoning her coat, and she looked up at the gray evening sky above the buildings. Then she walked to the train. She called Carmen from the platform. Carmen answered before the first ring finished. Nadia told her everything, all of it this time, without editing. She talked the whole train ride home, standing by the door with her phone pressed to her ear, and Carmen listened without interrupting, which was how Nadia knew she was holding space. When she finished, Carmen said, How do you feel? Nadia looked out the train window at the city moving past. Like something ended the right way, she said, which is different from a good ending, but it's not nothing. No, Carmen said, it's not nothing. At home, she made tea. She sat by the window. The city was the same as always, lights and movement, and the ordinary relentless continuation of everything. She sat with the quiet. She thought about Marco, not with longing, or not only with longing, with something more honest than that, a clear-eyed recognition of what had been real, and what it had cost, and what it had meant, and why it could not be what she would have wished for it to be at 19. There is a grief in that which is different from the grief of losing something. It is the grief of fully understanding something, which requires letting go of the version you used to carry. She let it go, not all at once, but she began to. In the morning, she got up and made coffee. She answered her emails. She went to work. 3 weeks later, she passed a storm drain on Ashland Avenue on her way to the bus stop, and she looked at it for just a moment, and then she kept walking. She kept walking, and the city moved around her, and the morning was cold and clear and entirely hers.